Hi, we're Team Ula, and this is our pitch. We're a group of animation students, and though we're currently working on our final year films, we didn't want to pass up the opportunity of working on a live project with the Bournemouth Visual Effects Festival. We know how important first-hand experience can be, and want this chance to work, learn, and showcase our ideas. But firstly, let me introduce you to our team. Starting with Amy. She's an experienced character artist and is responsible for most of the great character designs you're going to see. As a main component to pre-production, she's working heavily on our concepts, prop designs, and colour scripts. She will also act as a supporting animator in the later production stage. Next, meet Lucas. He's an integral asset in both pre-production as well as production, responsible for storyboarding our vision in these early stages. He's also a first-rate animator and draftsman, so will be our lead when it comes to animating. Our next member is Maury, a strong compositor with a real flair for sound and colour. He's a great guy to pass ideas back and forth with and generates a creative energy within the group. During production, Maury will be working on the layouts with Amy, but will come into his own in post-production, where his famous "we can fix it in post" attitude never fails to keep his team moving forward. Finally, let me introduce myself. My name's Matt, and I'm acting as director for the piece. Initially bringing the ideas, I'd consider myself as a generalist, organising and supporting all aspects of the production, be it creative direction, animating, and editing in post. So that's everyone. I've taken on the role as team leader, and I'll be the one taking you through our pitch. The brief of the competition seemed challenging, but also allowed for a vast freedom of creativity. We also liked that the brief asked for an innovative treatment of the text, giving us an opportunity to consider some really creatively fueled ways of handling the extracts. Initially, we all found the text very challenging, and would turn up to meetings with completely different takes on them. What this brief did do was get us all working daily as a team from 9 to 5, from sharing early ideas to filming the final pitch. It's a working routine we'd like to continue, and look forward to getting a taste of the industry by progressing further in this competition. Having all worked recently on self-proposed projects, we were each excited to be working from a more structured starting point. And as sun-starved northern folk, we look forward to seeing those white beaches we've heard so much about. So looking at the text, we chose The Time Machine by H.G. Wells. Initially, Lucas and I were drawn to the piece due to our shared love of H.G. Wells' War of the Worlds. But that aside, after sharing various concepts for all 6 of the extracts, we found The Time Machine was the only one where one of the ideas wasn't just a literal translation of the text. As such, we felt that it had the most scope for our own interpretation. Considering it as animators, it also stood out because of its unusual sense of pace. There's a real energy about the text and a dynamic feel of movement that would lend itself well to our predominantly 2D style of animation. You can almost see the flashes of light and colour as you continue to read. We all saw this as an opportunity to get some really creative techniques into the piece. When I first read the extract, my initial thoughts were that the text contained an underlying metaphor for aging. The pace of the piece builds faster and faster, which reflected life moving quicker and quicker, almost getting away from people, which felt like a very human view of aging. With the help of my team, this transformed into the poignant notion of growing out of childhood and the safety and fantasy that comes with it. So working with this mutual theme, as well as the other elements within the text, we created a first draft of a rough story, which followed the original narrative of the extract. With our theme of childhood and aging, I began to formulate our own short story using the basic narrative elements of the extract. The text starts, I press the lever over to its extreme position. I equated this to the turning off of a light switch, which led to a scene where a parent was putting their little boy to bed. Because of the space language found in the text, I thought it would be nice to show a small boy obsessed with space and space travel. He dreams of being an astronaut to get across our idea of childhood fantasy against the reality of growing up. The little boy is filled with a wild energy and excitement from seeing the moon and stars from his bed, and mirroring the rush of energy and loss of focus felt by the character in the time machine, he leaps across to his rocket wardrobe, unaware of the things he knocks over on the way. The wardrobe itself here is a representation of the physical time machine itself in the extract. We've turned it into a rocket to fit in with the space-obsessed little boy. As a group, we agreed that whilst not taking the extract literally, we would take some visual cues from it and tie them into our story. A good example is here, where we take the imagery of the slowest snail that ever crawled dashed by too fast for me, and turn this into an alien shadow that dashes across the wardrobe, making the boy jump. We see that the shadow is really just made by an ordinary snail crawling across the windowsill in the moonlight. Once the boy is in the wardrobe, we see a whole new world the boy has made for himself, complete with fairy-light stars and homemade rocket controls made out of tinfoil and scraps of paper. A part of the text that really stood out to me is the heavily visual description of the moon spinning through her quarters from new to full. I wanted the wardrobe to be a similarly visually spectacular sequence, and I thought of the boy having a projector that filled the wardrobe with beautiful light and images of the moon's stages. The boy then steps out of the wardrobe into a small, cramped box room. This is the boy's true future. Far from the magical astronaut childhood dreams, I wanted this end to contain a time travel element that is obviously taken from the extract, with our character stepping out into a dim and elusive world, except our world is the boy's grim future, and ties into our own theme of the realities of aging. With our initial story created and agreed upon by the group, we moved on to designing our characters and other elements of the film. Amy began to create character designs for the little boy. However, the more we discussed it, we came to the conclusion that it felt more poignant for a little girl to dream of being something as typically male like an astronaut, and this would make her dream all the more impossible to achieve, leading to a bigger payoff at the end and enhance our growing up message. We also wanted to move away from the generic stereotypes often seen in animation of little boys playing with space toys, and put our own unique spin on it. This is our final design for the little girl we called Marcia. We loved her tomboyish attitude and felt she had a perfect balance of cute and rough and tumble. Amy has a really good eye for colour, so I asked her to create some colour tests of Marcia. This is the sheet she produced, and as you can see, a lot of thought has gone into each design and how the colours will impact with the film's environment. To go along with the story, I created this concept image, which I wanted to use to get across the tone and feel of the film. Another crucial element that needed to be designed is the time machine wardrobe. Lucas came up with these 3 designs. Here we have a nice selection of our prop designs. These are all the minor elements of our story that needed designing. Very early on, as a group we decided we didn't want to do a literal representation of the extract, so we set about building our own story that follows the basic narrative elements of the given text, but also encompasses the feelings and messages of the original. In the text, a switch lever is pressed. The night follows and the surroundings grow fainter and hazier. In our story, this translates into the light being switched off in the child's room, indicating the night and bedtime. The door is closed gently, slowly fading out the light as the child appears to drift hazily to sleep. The character's ascent into motion affects his consciousness of the world around. He feels anticipation and unexplainable sensations. Marcia's leap from the bed is so impulsive that she's not conscious of the world around her and knocks over her chemistry set on the way. Her anticipation is felt as she reaches the wardrobe. The text uses contrast to further convey the character's sense of speed and reality. Parts like the slowest snail that ever crawled by dashing too fast. It's an early description of the irregularities brought on by time travel, which get described later in the text, such as the vapor trees that grow and change. In our film, the alien shadow is used to contrast the excited sense of motion with one of short-lived fear. It's a small taster or prelude to the out-of-reality feeling that's coming later. A lot of reference to colour and space language resonates in the text. Pace becomes relaxed as he describes the unpleasant sensation of the start being less poignant now. The out-of-world feel is visually represented in the space world that becomes more prominent within the wardrobe. The spinning slows down and the visuals are less chaotic now to reflect the tone of the text. In the text, the pace continues to slow, to a relaxed, clumsy swaying of the machine. In our film, we were going to have a cutaway shot of the outside of the wardrobe clumsily swaying to mirror this. However, we felt this unnecessarily broke up a really nice sequence in our film. At the end, the character exits the machine into a strange new surrounding. It's still the same planet, but everything is unfamiliar. In our film, Marcia exits her wardrobe into a view of her future. This represents a time lapse and the growth of youth we all go through, which brings us back to the aging metaphor that we all took from the story. It's the same room, but everything is unfamiliar. As well as taking the basic narrative elements and building our own story, we also wanted to represent some parts of the extract visually within the film to further relate the two. In the text, it starts with the night turning out like a lamp. This is represented in our film as the light from the doorway fading as it closes. There are also multiple references to a laboratory, which we have adapted into chemistry sets and little childish science experiments around the room, which get broken by the little girl leaping to the wardrobe, which is an interpretation of the deterioration of the lab in the extract. We also picked out the references to the hands upon the dials racing around faster and faster, and turned them into Marcia's clock, and the overall theme of time and aging. The girl's wardrobe has been turned into a rocket, which not only represents the physical time machine, but also the fast-moving motion that comes through in the text. Inside the wardrobe, Marcia projects the cycling phases of the moon, which are referenced heavily in the extract, and this projection begins to morph into a space world without boundaries, as we see through Marcia's eyes and her imagination. We took a lot of inspiration here from the space language used in the text, as well as this imaginary world that Marcia creates. We wanted to juxtapose the childhood fantasy with a sudden view of grim reality, and have her emerge from this wardrobe which has travelled through time into Marcia's future, which is a grey, gritty life of adult mediocrity. Although this isn't like the ending of the extract, our interpretation of the text led us to the time travelling being a metaphor for aging, and the melancholy sentiment of leaving childhood fantasy behind. With our designs and storyboards to hand, we set about making an animatic to try to lock the story down into 30 seconds or less. We use this as an opportunity to bring back the mood and feel of the concept art by adding a rough lighting element. Please enjoy our animatic. That's the end of our pitch. We had a lot of fun making it, so I hope you enjoyed watching it. We're Team Ula.